Hello everyone, it's Linda Hayes here to talk about short-term rentals. This video I'm going to cover some tips and efficiencies, and it's the first in a series of videos I'm going to do like this. So if you want more after this, make sure you subscribe. So if you haven't seen any of my videos before, I'll give you a little bit of my history. So I am an accountant and I've been in the rental business since 2006. And when I started with furnished rentals, it was in late 2017 when I built my first garden suite, which is a suite above a garage. And since then, I've had a lot more properties on Airbnb, and currently I have 6 different listings on the short-term rental space. So my properties, just so you know where I am, are in 2 places. So I have some in San Pedro, Belize, and that's a great location because it's near the 2nd largest barrier reef in the world, and it has fantastic weather year-round. English is the official language, so if you haven't visited there, you may want to do so. The other location is actually where I was growing up, and that is in Edmonton, Alberta. And the reason I started doing short-term rentals in West Edmonton is because they're near North America's largest shopping mall, which has a ton of entertainment destinations. So whenever you're thinking of short-term rentals, you want to make sure you're in a space that either tourists or short-term rental workers want to come. So through my history of short-term rentals and through my different investment groups that I'm part of, I have tried many different products to automate the process, and that's made a huge difference in my business. So that's why I've decided to do a series of videos on the things I've done to make my business more efficient. So the first thing I want to talk about is setting up a property. I've done many of these because I've been buying and selling properties over the last few years. So the first thing that I did after a couple of experiences is set up a template that I can use every time I'm furnishing a new suite. The first time I did it, I forgot things like a corkscrew, things like cutting boards, things that you'd use if you were staying in the suite. So it is very important to have a template that goes through each area in the house. What do you need in your kitchen? What do you need in a bedroom? And the more bedrooms you have, the more stuff you need. One thing to note is that every bed that you have, you should probably have 2 sets of linens. That makes the turnover a lot easier. So that is very important. And if you're unsure of how to start with a template, you can certainly reach out to people that have Airbnbs because they may have these like I do. Or you can also go through your own house, see what you have, and think about when you're staying in a furnished place where you want to cook and decide what things you think would be important. You can also consider what types of products you should be buying. So first thing is you want to make sure that your property is going to be picture ready. So is it going to look nice on Airbnb? You can go through existing Airbnb listings, look at what things are appealing to you, and make sure your space will look similar to that. Also, you want to consider what kind of warranty you have on your product. So if you find product that has a great warranty, you can get stain protection warranty, those kind of things might be useful in an Airbnb setting. I have had some property with really good warranty. So my new tiny home in Edmonton, I've actually had 2 instances where I've already used a stain warranty. So I had a stain on a really nice area rug that was covered for free under my warranty. I also had a stain on the mattress that was also cleaned for me for free. And obviously that stuff is something you pay for up front, but it can be a huge benefit rather than having to buy new product or things like that. And you also want to consider the longevity of the product you're buying. So if you don't want to buy too high quality stuff because it is a rental, but on the same token, you don't want things that you're going to have to replace after a couple of years because things with Airbnb are getting quite a bit of use from different people over time. So if you've set up your suite and you assume it's going to be ready for a guest, you might be surprised about things you've forgotten. So one of the best things you can do right off the bat is stay in the suite yourself. So take a staycation. Go stay in the suite for a night, cook some food, try out the dishwasher, try out the laundry. Everything like that will make sure everything is working for the stay just like it might for a guest. The other thing I've done often is have a friend stay, especially when I was doing a rental in a new location. Like when I started in Belize, I had one of my friends in Belize worked through the whole booking process because I got him to do the booking, see what was going to happen with payments, everything else, because it was a new currency for me on Airbnb, so I had to set it up in US dollars versus Canadian dollars, and I wasn't sure how that would all work. Would it go into my bank properly? And I wanted to make sure I could do that with a friend rather than someone else. And he went through and did all the stuff for me, told me stuff that was missing, any problems he had while he was staying there, and that helped a lot. Another thing to do is have a guest manual, and everything in the guest manual should be things based on questions you get. So sometimes it's a little hard to create this in the very beginning until you have experience with things that people ask, but common questions I get is, how do I work the shower? I mean, I have complicated showers where you have to pull down under the faucet, so I get that question a lot. What is the Wi-Fi code? Yes, it's on Airbnb. Don't presume people read that. I have it on Airbnb. I have it in a communication email to guests, and I have it in the guest manual, and still sometimes I have people asking me. Next, I'm going to talk about door locks. So how do people get access to your suite? I'm going to give some examples of different types of properties where you may need different types of door locks. So when you're looking at door locks, it is important to have a separate code for each guest for their stay. So initially, when I started in Airbnb, I wasn't that familiar with this. I had a keypad for entry, but I didn't want to keep it the same all the time, so I got my cleaners to change it maybe every quarter because I knew a lot of people weren't even in the city, so it's not like they could come back again after they left. However, that's not always the case. Sometimes I have people that are staying in my suites because their place is being renovated, or they're staying visiting family and they come back quite often. So having a different code is obviously very important for security. Now, the other thing is letting people know the codes can be quite a problem if you are setting up different codes. So ideally, you want some door locks that will integrate with Airbnb, which likely we have choices for that now. And I have two different products I use depending on the type of property. So I have one that I really like that has a keypad and uses Wi-Fi, and it, like I said, integrates directly with Airbnb. And in some cases, this doesn't work well. So another one that I use is a lockbox for a key that works offline. And I'll talk about each of those and why I use them. So now I want to talk about the door locks I use. So there's two different ones. So the one I really like is the Yale with August software. So I buy this at Best Buy, and it integrates with Airbnb and sets up a separate code for each guest. And the only time I have to edit this is if a guest, I've approved them to check in early, then I'll have to go in and update it because it even sets the times appropriately. And you can have codes for cleaners and other staff, which is great. And you can also unlock doors from your phone. And that's great if you have a contractor entering where you don't want to give them a regular code. You can also look up a history of who went in and when they did it. And this does require Wi-Fi to work correctly. And you want to make sure you always update your batteries to make sure it doesn't die. But there is a key backup in this lock. The next one I use is called Igloo Home. And this one does not require Wi-Fi and it can be mounted anywhere. So that's an advantage. And I use this because my locks in Belize have a small keypad, a small keyhole, I should say, and that means I can't use this large keypad. Plus, I wasn't sure how Wi-Fi was going to work on that property, so I didn't want to rely on it, although I found it actually does work fine. So the Igloo Home does integrate with Airbnb as well. The only thing is I can't set up codes remotely. So to set up a new code for somebody, I actually have to be at the property close by the lock to set it up on my phone. And so what I did in that case is just set up a bunch of emergency codes that I have on my phone in case I do need to give codes to somebody unexpectedly. And the good thing about the locks, especially the Yale one, is I can actually unlock doors from people in Edmonton, for people in Edmonton, even when I'm in Belize. So that's a huge advantage to having the Yale lock. And Igloo Home as well, the fact that it integrates with Airbnb saves me a ton of time in sending guests codes. So I can say that definitively because I do have my properties listed on Vrbo as well and Booking.com. And so I do have to go in my calendar for those and let guests set up separate codes for those types of guests. But for Airbnb, it works seamlessly. So another challenge with having short-term rentals is hiring cleaners. So a lot of cleaners are not all that reliable. I've often hired different people off Kijiji in Edmonton, and they just don't end up showing up. So usually I have had a really good cleaner, and they will train new cleaners that are coming, but it doesn't always work where they show up as I said. Now you do want to make sure you have more than one cleaner available, even if you only have one property, because you can have check-in and out any day of the week. And if somebody's sick or somebody's not available, it is good to make sure you have someone on backup. So I have a couple of companies I use as backup. One is called Mopify, and I have that on my website for the Edmonton market. If I am in a pinch, I can message Mopify and say, hey, I need a cleaner on Friday, let's say. And that might just be because my regular cleaner was off. And one thing you got to make sure is that your cleaners are available during the gap in stays if you're going to do back-to-back stays. So most of my properties, I have a check-in at 11 a.m. and a check-in at 4 p.m. So if a guest leaves, another one can come and my cleaners come in the middle, and that works very well in Edmonton. In Belize, it's a different story. There, I definitely have a little more challenge finding reliable people, and I don't even know for sure if they will show up, and that is a common problem in that market. So what I instead do is I have a one-day gap in between stays. So I'll book my cleaner on the day of the checkout and schedule them to come that day, but if worse comes to worse and they don't show up, then I can get someone else the next morning before a guest is to check in. So that's something I've done in Belize just because I know it's a little more tricky. So when you are hiring new cleaners, make sure you check references. And what I've done when I have someone new is I go to the property at least 3 times after they've cleaned to make sure things are correct. And common things that they might forget are things like if I have a Keurig machine, making sure the pod is taken out of the machine. Things like that are common, and you want to make sure it is spick and span because guests are very sensitive to properties that are not properly maintained. The next thing I wanted to talk about is revenue and pricing. So when you are setting up your Airbnb, you have it ready to go, how do you set the right price? So Airbnb will allow you to have a thing called smart pricing, which it'll do some suggestions for you. And what I found is typically it is a lot lower than what I want to charge. So I could look in my market, check what other properties are charging, but it should be different on different days depending how busy the season is, what day of the week it is, and what kind of events are happening in the area. So if you don't know that, your pricing might be too low some days and too high other times. Now, if you set your overall price as too high, then you're going to probably have a lot more vacancy than you need. If you have it too low, you're leaving money on the table. So you might want to, in the beginning of having an Airbnb, offer a discount to get guests in because that will help you get good reviews on your property. So when the more reviews you have that are positive, the more property bookings you will get. So I am going to talk more about pricing in detail in a future video because I do have software that does take into account events and other properties in the area, different days of the week, and seasonality. So I'll do that in a separate video because I don't want too much in one because this is already a little bit long. So the last topic I want to cover is talking about getting great reviews for your property. So assuming you've done the setup properly and you have a great product for customers, the other things you need to do are to set expectations. So if you have any issues with your property, say there's construction in the area, maybe it's hard to find, anything like that, you want to make sure you let the guests know that in advance of them coming to stay. You also want to anticipate questions and have any answers to those questions in your manual as well as your communication with guests. The other thing is it's very important to have regular communication and check-ins with the guests. And this is a very onerous process if you don't have any automation. So when I had one property, I was able to do this properly, fairly easily, even while having a full-time job. When I got up to 3 properties, I found this was just way too much to manage. So because I really wanted 5-star reviews, because they're very important to get superhost status in Airbnb, I knew I needed a different way to do this. Because sending messages is very time consuming and so many of them are the same over and over again. You know, the ones that are thanks for booking, the ones that are, hey, reminder it's checkout tomorrow. All those kind of things are important. And I will demo the software in a future video that I'm using, but I'm going to talk about that software next and give some QR codes so you can try these different softwares I'm talking about before I do the detailed videos. So first I just wanted to highlight what Hospitable looks like. As I mentioned, I'll do a video with a lot more detail on Hospitable at a later time, but right now you can see a few of the most important points about this software that I love. So you can automate all of your guest messaging, the standard types of things. So for example, check-in instructions. You can see in my pending messages, I have check-in instructions for Heather Clancy, and I can edit them. She's going to be checking into property 8616, and the message I've created there that will go out to every single guest going into 8616 will be the directions to get to that suite, telling them to check to make sure they've got their entry code that comes directly from Yale, and if not, to message me. I have first morning messages that basically check that everybody's happy and that they don't have any questions about the property, because that helps with the 5-star experience that you want in your reviews. I also have checkout instructions to remind guests the day before they check out about what I expect them to do at the time of checkout, those kind of things. And there's all kinds of messages you're not seeing on this screen, just depending on what's happening in the business right now. The other thing that Hospitable does is there is an active question rule. So they have artificial intelligence that is basically meant to detect questions. So for example, if somebody asks, can I check in early? I have a message that will basically draft something to the guest saying early check-in is only allowed a few days in advance, this is the fee associated with it, and those kind of things. So basically you can have automation like that. Doesn't mean you're totally out of answering questions because you can't automate everything, but you can certainly automate a lot using this software. The other thing that I do through Hospitable that I really like is that every time a new guest books, an email goes out to the cleaner telling them the details of that reservation. So in Edmonton, my cleaners automatically get emails and they're able to enter in when they're going to go clean in their calendar based on the emails that they get from Hospitable directly. So before I used to have to I set up a Google Sheet where I'd go put in all the different guests when they're checking in, when they're checking out, and then assign cleaners to it. In this software, I can actually assign different cleaners for different properties, which of course I do for my Edmonton versus my Belize properties. In Edmonton, my cleaners that I use now are awesome. They can go into the Hospitable calendar, they can look for their task checklist there, but they also get the initial emails. Belize is a bit harder because a lot of the cleaners are a little bit older and they may not have computers or emails, so it's a little bit more of a manual process there. So Smart B&B is actually the name of what this software used to be called, now called Hospitable. And I highly recommend that even if you have one property, that you look into this software because it automates so much in your business and it requires a lot less time than what you have to do without the use of the software. So on the next slide, I'm going to provide a QR code where you can get into the software, try it for free for 2 weeks, and see what you think, because it is a way that you can manage your business a lot more efficiently. So one other thing that I forgot to mention about Hospitable that I really like is the way they do the pricing. So you're only charged for the software if you actually have a check-in in one of your properties. So in times where I have long-term guests, so a lot of times I'll have someone book for a few months and there's no check-in or out, then I'm not actually paying for that particular property in the month. So the software is very, very affordable. And you can check out all the software I use because I put QR codes here. So my Hospitable software, of course, is what I use for communication. If you're looking at doing automated pricing, I have that QR code in the middle there. And if you're looking at a more advanced strategy where you'd like to take direct bookings and you want metrics for accounting and things like that, my property management software I use, I have the QR code for that there as well. And as I mentioned, I will do videos on these at a later time, so make sure you subscribe if you'd like to see more. And if you do have specific questions or would like any of my templates, you can certainly reach out through Buy Me a Coffee, and I hope to see you in future videos.